What's up guys, this is Bigbobbedboi, morebuzz.com. How are you all doing tonight? My name is Bigbobbedboi and welcome to my class choosing guide for Season of Discovery. Very briefly, I want to cover what this guide is. I'm going to give you all the currently available, most up-to-date information for each class in SoD centered around level 25, covering their playstyle and what's available to you. I'm not just going to read off rune names and descriptions, so you can make an informed decision on which classes you want to play in SoD. No one wants to spend a week or two playing a class just to think, shit, I should have leveled Hunter. I'm not going to spoil how you unlock any runes, some of that has been data mined. And I'm not going to cover PvP because I already did that in another video. This is pre-release, so some things will change. A lot has already changed since BlizzCon and will continue to change even after release. I cannot tell you how much DPS a class or spec is going to do. No one can tell you that. If they say they can, they are lying to you. However, I can almost guarantee all classes will be not only viable but competitive. Although at some level brackets, some specs will not be so great. But they mentioned they wanted respec costs to be drastically lower, and for runes, the slide at BlizzCon literally said, swap anytime, so swapping specs around should be much easier. Pretty cool? Alright, deploy the guide. Priest is looking fantastic, although they were already fantastic in Classic. In SoD, you don't have any new roles open up. You have the option to heal, or DPS has Shadow. Shadow looks much better compared to original, even at level 25. Glove runes open up Shadow or Death for more single target, or Mind Seer so you can actually AoE. At level 25, a lot of classes have really shit AoE, so that's potentially pretty valuable. Leg runes bring a similar thing with an AoE and single target option, basically cleaving your Shadow Word Pain around or Homunculi. Homunculi could be extremely good or absolute trash. We really don't know what kind of damage it does or how strong these debuffs are, reducing a target's attack speed, attack power, and armor. All three of those are very good debuffs, so there's potential for Shadow Priest to be very sought after for PvE. Seems like this was being iterated on a lot. I was trying to find even just a hint of what these debuffs would look like, and I found an old data mine version that summoned 5 skeletons at one point. That would have been pretty cool. Chest runes open up either a new dot in Void Plague or more Mind Flay and Blast damage on your targets if they have Shadow Word Pain. With all of this, Shadow should be quite good early on, mana likely being your main issue. Later down the line, Shadow could run into issues though. It didn't scale very well in Classic, either with spell power or crit, since a lot of your abilities couldn't even crit, and you had huge mana issues. I would expect most of this to be resolved in SoD though, with runes at 40, 50, or 60, and there's already been data mined info for Shadow Fiend, which would help a lot with mana, and maybe we'll even get VT in the future. The healing side of Priest is going to be very solid. Glove runes bring in either Penance or Circle of Healing, kind of mirrors Shadow with a single target and AoE option. For the chest, you've got Serendipity, causes some of your single target heals to reduce the cast time of Prayer of Healing or Strength of Soul, causes your single target heals to reduce the weakened soul effect on targets by 4 seconds. But also, warrior/bears still gain rage, and righteous fury effects will still trigger under the event of Power Word Shield. This is a noticeable quality of life improvement for priests when healing dungeons now. You can pre-shield warriors without any issues now. And legs are a very interesting slot. You can grab Prayer of Mending or Power Word Barrier. Prom is a fantastic heal spell, especially if it can bounce around multiple tanks or tanks in melee. Power Word Barrier is equally as good, although more situational, reducing all party members in the barrier damage taken by 25% and preventing spell pushback for 10 seconds is absolutely insane. It is a long cooldown of 3 minutes though. And unless you know the fight pretty well, it can be hard to make use of it. You can just drop it on the tank to reduce damage for 10 seconds, but it is best served when you know there's a group-wide AoE that you know is coming, or a tank buster you know is coming, something to that effect. Healing Priest is still going to feel like Priest. There's great new stuff here, but nothing really earth-shattering in the way it alters Priest gameplay. And looking at the other level brackets in the future, Priest is going to be good at all of them. Shadow Priest should be especially strong at 40, and as far as future runes go, other than the Shadow Fiend, I couldn't really find anything, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a Smite or Smite Holy Fire spec become possible in the future with some new runes. Or if Blizzard wants to get really wild, a Star Shards spec. Priest is unique in that it didn't really get any new styles of play with runes, so I would highly expect another DPS option to show up in the future. And the reason for Star Shards being, it is likely you can swap Priest ratios around. I wouldn't say it's confirmed, but it is likely. So all race priests would be able to use Star Shards, or Devouring Plague, or Shadow Guard, or Fear Ward, which would be pretty nice. Rogue. I love Rogue, but things are gonna get weird. Rogue probably has the weirdest set of runes any class is getting. If you want to do a Sinister Strike build, you've got options for that. Saber Slash is just an upgraded Sinister Strike with a bleed. If daggers are your thing, you can do that like before, but better. Slaughter from the Shadows, reducing the energy cost by 1/3 on backstab and ambush is really nice. So that's good stuff. Then you get more PvP oriented runes like Quick Draw and Between the Eyes, although Between the Eyes does do damage, probably not a lot. And Shiv. It's Shiv, okay? And Shadow Strike. So Shadow Strike right now is mainly going to be for the teleport in PvP. And then this is where things go off the rails. There's a full kit of runes for a poison build. That sounds cool. Deadly Brew, Mutilate, and Envenom. But remember, poisons kind of suck in vanilla. They don't stack with Wind Fury, they have charges, they don't scale. A lot of enemies are just straight up immune. If I remember right, they can even be resisted, but I don't remember if normal hit chance or spell hit affects that. They've got a lot of things going against them, but I said it was going to get weird. Mutilate does not say it requires daggers, and Venom does not say it consumes deadly poison. This is weird. This build is going to have some serious problems, but I could also see times where this is very good. It's very possible some of the issues with this build will be ameliorated later on when I get other runes. Then Blizz said, fuck it, and ramped the weirdness up to 11. Rogues are getting a tank spec with a full kit of runes for it. Just Flesh Wound, Blade Dance, and Mangosh. This makes for a really strong but also really terrible tank. It's going to be pretty limited in scope. You could probably stack some HP by taking Druid tank gear. You are not crittable, but you are crushable and you have no armor. At low levels, this is probably going to be pretty bad, although later on it will be better, but still probably not great. You will get some pretty high levels of avoidance, and at 60, you could stack those to stratospheric levels of avoidance. I wouldn't be surprised if 100% is possible. That, plus a really good threat, would make you a very solid single target tank, although the damage you take would be really spiky, so even if you live, you're going to give your healers a heart attack every time you get hit. So you may be able to raid tank some depending on the fight, but dungeons will be rough. You have no AoE and no way to group up mobs, and you don't want to tab target it because remember, you lose your combo points if you change targets in vanilla. You do get 20% parry from buffs, but you need a Mangosh to get 10%, which that's only up half the time, and the other from Blade Dance at 5 combo points. Maybe you can get Ghostly Strike at some point, and the 20% reduced damage from just a Flesh Wound doesn't activate until you have Blade Dance up. So you're going to probably want to get that off immediately before it would give you the full parry amount. That is dumb. That should just be a passive. It's going to be super awkward for a rogue to just waddle up to a group of mobs taking full damage, trying to group them up and trying to get threat. I do think you could do okay on some single target fights, but I gotta say, the spec is looking really janky. Some later talents like Blade Fury will also help, but this is likely it's going to get some more runes later to fill it out. And looking to the future of Rogue, you have two builds that are looking extremely similar to Classic, just a bit better. If you like those, you got them, but better, and they're going to be good the whole time. The other two options, Poison and Tanking, they got some problems, but I really do think they will get some better runes in the future. And I think in general, Rogue has a lot of cool runes to look forward to. Cheat Death was on the PTR, but removed. My guess is it will come back eventually, but maybe locked only to the tank build. I would also expect either Fan of Knives or maybe even Poison Bomb to show up. Rogue has like no AoE at all. Poison Bomb with the poison spec would be a cool way to give that spec some flavor and give Rogue some AoE options. Since we have Shadow Strike, I wouldn't be surprised to see Shadow Dance show up at some point, or we might get Shadow Step. And the final thing, I did find this Escape Plan. I have no idea what this is. It could never show up at all, but hey, it sounds cool. And I just gotta ask, why no ranged spec? That would have been so much cooler to me than a rogue tank spec. It could have been similar to Red Mage, where you're mostly a ranged, you have your ranged attacks build up, and then you jump in to unleash a melee combo. We could have even gotten, say, Death from Above to jump into the target, and then use Grappling Hook to jump back out from the melee combo. Ah, why Blizz? Why? I needed that. Mage is another class that was really good in Classic. In a lot of situations, it was the best class, especially at imitating vending machines. Remember leveling at the launch of Classic? If you weren't a mage, it was pretty hard to get a group as a DPS. In SoD, they can fill 2 roles, DPS or healing, and for DPS, you have a lot of options. Frost gets a full rune kit, Fingers of Frost, Icy Veins, and Ice Lance. Frost is already incredibly strong for leveling. Adding these runes on top is kind of wild. Fingers of Frost actually makes us viable in PvE, because it seems like even if the target is slow/root immune, Fingers will still proc. The only real downside is at 25, while you can get 5 points in Ice Shards, you will only get 1 point in Shatter, which is pretty necessary for Ice Lance to feel right. Fire also has a full kit of runes, Burnout, Living Flame, and Living Bomb. Living Bomb is a strong AoE spell if it gets to go off. Burnout is 15% crit, but your spell crits cost 1% more mana. However, that's base mana. SoD has had everything shifted over to base mana for some reason, I guess to kill downranking, I don't know. 1% base mana is extremely low cost. I'm not sure why they even have that on there at this point. And the Living Flame seems like another solid AoE, kind of similar to Frozen Orb and how it travels. Fire looks very solid, but it probably won't be flexing too hard at level 25. Fire still gets Ignite through talents later, and still loves crit. You will get the 15% from Burnout, but that might not be enough to cover things. It will depend on what kind of gear we can end up getting at level 25. Of course, at later brackets, it's looking extremely strong. Arcane is a really interesting one. It also fits into the weird specs category. It has a full kit of runes, and is still about playing the mana game. Enlightenment, Arcane Surge, and Arcane Blast. With that mana management, everything here feels pretty standard Arcane to me, with the exception of this version of Arcane Blast. Each time you cast Arcane Blast, the damage and healing of all other Arcane spells is increased by 15%, and the mana cost of Arcane Blast is increased by 175%. This effect stacks up to 4 times and lasts 6 seconds, or until any other arcane damage or healing spell is cast. You're not using Arcane Blast to do bigger Arcane Blasts. You're doing Arcane Blast to build up a big Arcane Missiles, Arcane Explosion, maybe Arcane Surge. I wouldn't be surprised if this gets a new rune for maybe A-Bar in the future. And finally, the Mage Healer spec. Once again, you got a full kit of 3 runes. Regeneration, a channeled single target healing spell with a massive mana cost that places Temporal Beacon. What's Temporal Beacon? Records the subject's space-time position. 40% of all arcane damage done by the caster will be converted to chronomantic healing and divided among the caster's current temporal beacon targets. Temporal beacon targets, remember that. Mass regeneration. 15-yard range, that's kinda short for an AoE heal. That's also channeled, and it does place temporal beacon. Once again with a huge mana cost. It's 69 nice% base mana. The fuck? Now you see why the 1% on Burnout was nothing. And finally, rewind time. 1 minute cooldown originally, now changed to 30 seconds. Your current target with your temporal beacon instantly heals all damage taken over the last 5 seconds. Ineffective on targets that did not have a temporal beacon 5 seconds ago. Well, that has to be worded wrong. Your current target with your temporal beacon. But Mass Regen says applies temporal beacon to each target for 15 seconds. So one of those is wrong. I can't tell you which. I'm guessing it's just incorrect wording on temporal beacon. However, this does bring up an interesting point. If your AoE does put temporal beacon on all targets, don't have complete control over where it goes. For example, you may have to do a group heal, but then the tank's getting hit and all the healing from your arcane damage is split amongst the group instead of focused on the tank where you want it. That's pretty awkward. Also, it's only 40% arcane damage getting turned into healing now. Originally it was 100, but it has been changed. So grab Arcane Blast or Arcane Surge, right? Well, no, you really can't. Those are leg and glove runes. You only have Arcane Missiles and Arcane Blast, which is not a lot outside of potentially AoE. It's nice you have mana gems and Evocate because the mana costs are insane. 69% for mass regen and 43% for regen. And you have no res, although one was data mined. Some people were worried about threat, but you have Arcane Sub, and these spells are all arcane. So you should be fine, which is a good thing, because you won't ever be able to ice block if you're healing. Yeah, this is a weird spec. Rewind time and temporal beacon sound like dope shit, but it just seems a little awkward and incomplete. I'm not sure how good this is going to be at 25. It really feels like it needs a few more runes to kind of make it less awkward. But the future of Mage does look really good. Frost and Fire are only going to get better, and I hope to God they don't get Deep Freeze. Frost is already strong enough. And Heal Spec will probably see a lot of changes over time, which is surprisingly fitting. Like the aforementioned, res, and possibly a way to cleanse magic with remove greater curses was data mined. For other runes, the only ones I saw data mined was Brain Freeze. This is really cool, and maybe means Frostfire Bolt could show up in the future. Things look pretty good for Mage. Druid. The Druid flavor system is looking exceptionally delicious in SoD. You've got 4 styles of play and all 4 look fantastic. With Feral probably at the top, at least at level 25. Feral DPS gets Wild Strikes, Savage Roar, and Mangle. All of those are honestly really goddamn good. Wild Strikes is basically Wind Fury Totem before Shamans can get Wind Fury Totem. That alone makes Feral Druid one of the most sought after DPS in the level 25 bracket. Savage Roar and Mangle. That's just pretty solid DPS. Feral Tank gets Survival of the Fittest, which will make you crit immune, and Skull Bash for the interrupt, although it shares a cooldown with Feral Charge. And then Lacerate or Mangle. They unfortunately share a slot. You can also drop Survival of the Fittest for Wild Strikes depending on what you will be tanking and your group comp. Feral flexing between Cat DPS and Bear Tank on the side is going to be fairly common. Bear Tank seems like it might need its runes reshuffled a bit, but Bear Tank is not bad. It's still a strong tank with really high threat. Boomkin also gets a full rune kit. Fury of the Storm Rage, Star Surge, and Sunfire. That was really hard not to say Stunfire. The damage here is not super clear, but Star Surge should get quite good as you can fill out your talents, since it gains all the benefits of not only Starfire but also Wrath. Though Fury of the Storm Rage is the real standout here. It completely removes the mana cost of Wrath. What the fuck? No other caster has their basic spell for free. That's fairly useful in general. You'd never have to stop to drink. And there may be fights in the future with some kind of mana drain gimmick. You'd be super strong there. It can also proc instant healing touches. While not the most useful thing in PvE, you could clutch save someone with an instant healing touch. And you won't be in Moonkin form at 25, so it wouldn't be a huge interruption. And there's some use for that while leveling. These are really solid looking changes here. Resto gets Living Seed, Life Bloom, and Wild Growth. Wild Growth is quite good. The range on this was buffed to 40 yards, and the healing was also buffed. Mass Regen still says 15 yards. Like I said, that's a bit fucked. This gives you a very solid heal for what was probably Healing Druid's biggest problem in Classic, AoE healing. Life Bloom is, well, Life Bloom. It's mostly unchanged. However, this same rune also buffs Rejuve and Life Bloom by reducing the GCD by 0.5 seconds when using them. This is a huge quality of life improvement whenever you're trying to just throw out a bunch of Rejuves or Life Blooms. Druid could feel really slow just clicking through those unit frames like that. Living Seed. So this one it's alright. Anytime you get a crit heal, a seed is planted that is basically like Prom. It will proc the next time they are attacked, healing for 30% the original amount. This will help Druids a lot on the meters. It was really common for Druids to get sniped, so that's cool, but I don't think this is really going to change how you play or make Druid healer specifically better or different. Feral is kinda insane, but all the other specs do seem really good. Druid is shockingly solid all around. I don't see any problems in the future. The only thing I can think of is Manual Crowd Pummeler. I have not seen Blizz say anything about this. Maybe they tweeted something and I missed it, I don't know. But if you still have to farm those, that will suck really, really bad. Especially at the level 40 and 50 brackets. You can't just solo that. You'd need a group's help with that, and that would be a bitch. I'm not sure what other Druid runes we'll see in the future. maybe Nourish, but I couldn't find any info on other data mine ones except possibly a buffed Tiger's Fury rune, but it could be an NPC version, and potentially Replenish Spirit. This looks like a Druid ability, but I am not in any way positive about it. Personally, I'd love to see Symbiosis, but I highly doubt that will happen. Shaman. Shaman may have the most stacked set of runes. Damn near every one of them is very good. They've got 4 styles of play, let's check them out. Melee damage first, so in hands, it's super cool, but not so much at 25. I think it's even more anemic than Warrior. You've got Dual Wield, Shamanistic Rage, Lava Lash, or Molten Blast. Lava Lash sucks. It's always sucked. The animation even sucks. I hope I'm wrong, but I doubt they've suddenly made it good. Molten Blast, though, is pretty interesting. It does a high amount of threat, so that could cause problems. You have to watch out for that. But it looks like a fairly solid AoE ability, and Flame Shock's dot can reset its cooldown, so you could potentially be spamming that shit if you're lucky. Shamanistic Rage is extremely cool and better than the versions we've had before. Can be used as a defensive or more likely a way to regen mana. It was also buffed in a build update to restore some of your party's mana, equal to 10% of what you restored, and Dual Wield spec is just a flat 5% hit, even for spells. So why wouldn't this be good at 25? Don't have Wind Fury, don't have Storm Strike. That's pretty big. Now, the other weapon enhancements Shaman can get, like Rockbiter, actually do add some damage. They aren't completely worthless, and you could Molten Blast. So I wouldn't put this on a dumpster fire tier or anything, but it's just not really in place at 25, although you could play it. It will, however, pick up a ton by the level 40 bracket. Elemental. Now this seems good right from the rip. You've got a ton of flexibility. Chest slot is Overload. 33% chance for your spell to strike again for 50% damage and no threat. This works with Lightning Bolt and your glove rune, Lava Burst. Yeah, it's Lava Burst. It was awesome before, it looks awesome now. 8-second cooldown and still has the guaranteed crit if the target is flame shocked. Leg rune is also probably Shamanistic Rage. Yeah, now it can restore mana based on spell power and still restores party mana. That is pretty damn nice. Pretty cool kit, honestly. But you've got a ton of options to swap things around here, especially for leveling. Instead of Overload, you could take Shield Mastery. That sounds weird. Why do that? Well, hopefully we're killing mobs before they can even get to us, but mobs are buffed in SoD, so we don't know to what degree that will be possible. If it isn't possible and Shamanistic Rage doesn't keep your mana up, you could take Shield Mastery for the mana return. 8% max mana, not base mana, on block. That's a lot, and you get a massive survivability increase. Except you cannot block while casting. Yeah, so I see a lot of people recommend this, and there's potential for it in PvP, I guess, like if you're the designated FC, but then you'd want to do a whole build around that, so that's something a little different. But for this to work while leveling, you'd have to just stand there and let mobs hit you so you can block. I'd probably not do that. However, you could drop Lava Burst for Water Shield while leveling. It really just depends on how fast you're able to kill mobs and how mana efficient things end up being, because we don't know for sure since all the mana costs were moved around a bit. Overall, things are looking really nice for Ellie. It definitely feels like Elemental. Only real downside to 25 is you're missing Chain Lightning. Resto Shaman also looks great. I keep saying that a lot. Overload is fantastic for Resto, as for some reason it also procs on Chain Heal and Healing Wave. But not Lesser Healing Wave. I don't get that. Overload proccing Chain Heals is insane. Your other chest option is Healing Rain, which looks alright. It's not a placeable version of Healing Rain. It needs a target, and it heals 15 yards around the target. It's not a big area, and it costs a lot of mana. Could be situationally useful, but Overload on top of that Chain Heal, that's a really good. For legs, you've got Earth Shield. It's the Earth Shield we know, and it's the Earth Shield we know. It's not bad. Or you could get Ancestral Guidance. This is extremely cool. 2-minute cooldown. For 10 seconds, 25% of your damage is converted to healing, and 100% of that healing is then converted back into damage on your Flame Shock target. Weirdly, it's only on 3 party members. You'd think it'd be single target or group wide. As long as you can time the healing right, this is pretty cool. And for gloves, it is pretty much just going to be Water Shield. Not a lot of options there. And lastly, the Shaman tank, the ramp up tank as I call them. For the chest, we'll want Shield Mastery, and this is why it's the ramp up tank. Each block, you gain 30% of your shield's armor value. The fuck? That's a lot of armor, actually. You also get 8% max, not base, mana returned on each block. With a passive 10% increased block chance, that's nice. And 15% block value, okay, that's nothing. Legs have Way of Earth. This is your literal tank rune. When you have Rockbiter on, 50% increased threat, 30% increased HP, 10% reduced damage to you. Crit immune, and Earthshock gets turned into a taunt. Yeah, that is solid AF. For gloves, you'll probably want Molten Blast, the AoE cone attack that has high threat and cooldown can reset with Flame Shock Dot. There's no big issues here. This is a solid tank. While you don't have a ton at 25, later on, this is a really solid tank with fantastic group buffs. The only weakness I see here is potentially avoidance. There's not a lot of defense gear for Shaman. You do get 5 dodge from talents, and later on you get an additional 10% armor from talents. But at 25 you won't be able to parry either. So everything looks really good except for the low avoidance. I'm pretty pumped for Shaman specs personally, all of them. Enhance looks a little not all together at 25, but other than that everything is looking, like I said, really solid. And I don't see anything falling behind in the future brackets either. I didn't see a lot of data mined stuff for Shaman in the way of runes. There was a possible version of Maelstrom data mine, which would be pretty cool for Enhance, but it was nowhere close to complete, so I wouldn't read into that too much. Paladin, my original main, and a class I still deeply adore. Something I've noticed with all the hybrid classes is Blizzard seems to have put a focus on making their meme to not great specs better, because pretty much everything that was in that category for hybrid before is now really solid. And that rings true for Paladin. So Paladin has 3 playstyles, but a few leg runes are kind of universal. Let's check those out first. Rebuke. Probably won't need this for any spec in PvE unless your group just has no interrupts, or there's some ability that's imperative to interrupt for some reason. Divine Sacrifice. 30% of all damage taken by party members is redirected to you for 10 seconds. Under 20% HP, the effect breaks, and then the Paladin is granted 10% increased damage and healing done for 10 seconds. That is super cool, I can't lie. Divine Sacrifice was already a useful ability for redirecting damage, and it still does that, although you can't sidestep the damage with Divine Shield. But now, it won't feel particularly horrible to take this ability as a Ret DPS or off tank, because the damage and healing boost out of it is really cool. Ret. Ret looks awesome and has a nice suite of runes. Chest is probably the most congested though. Vix is good for chest congestion though. Seal of Martyrdom, it's mostly the Seal of Blood we know. It is down to a 30-second duration like other seals in Classic. Okay, never mind, this just got updated. It's now strictly single target. You lose 10% HP, but your party members now gain 10% of the damage you deal as mana. Very interesting. Divine Storm is also a chest rune. It's Divine Storm, like unchanged. Both really cool abilities. I would assume if there's enough targets you would drop Martyr so that you're Divine Storming and using command, although I do think there is some potential here for seal twisting with Martyr. It's just a matter of mana. Leg rune. Oh wait, there's another chest rune. Horn of Lordaeron. So Horn of Winter, but uses a chest rune and is exclusive with Blessing of Might. What is the point of this? I could see some use here as a buff instead of BOM depending on party comp, but dropping Divine Storm or Martyr to use it, I'm a pass, but you do you, bud. Leg runes. Exorcist. This lets you use Exorcism on anything, and it's an auto crit on undead or demons. Super nice. And there's only one option for gloves, Crusader Strike. Now this was nerfed a little bit, yes, but at least this restores mana, so even if you go you've got something you can do. Ret has a really strong toolkit here, and it really does feel like Ret Paladin. You've got options for single target or AoE damage. You've got options for party support, especially now that you can restore a lot of party mana with Martyrdom. Very nice. Tank Paladin. Aegis is possibly the tank-oriented rune for chest slot, but it has a very similar effect to Redoubt and doesn't stack with Redoubt. Block value isn't super important, so that part isn't a big deal. I'm not sure if this is here for content where you're not going to get crit, because Redoubt only procs on a crit. This is a flat 10% chance. Otherwise, Divine Storm doesn't require a two-handed weapon, so you can grab that, I guess. The tank-specific leg rune is Avenger's Shield. This is not the Silence version, it is the Daze version, but it's still a nice pull ability, 30-sec cooldown, 30-yard range. And finally, Glove rune is the big one, Hand of Reckoning. So you get your much-needed taunt, and it's a normal taunt, not the weird one Paladin had in TBC. But it also increases the threat from Righteous Fury, causes heals on you to restore your mana, and gives you Ardent Defender. As expected, Paladin tank looks solid, and it probably will be the king of AoE threat. You can still get Consecrate even at level 25, though you'll miss a few nice prot talents. Now, Healing Paladin, I know you didn't expect me to say this, but yeah, it also looks solid. Although the rune selection is not that exciting. For chest runes, you don't have much, basically just Horn of Lordaeron or Aegis. Legs, you have the options from before. Divine Sacrifice, probably the default one, then Inspiration Exemplar or Rebuke, depending on the situation. Did I forget to mention Inspiration Exemplar? If I did, Inspiration Exemplar is basically Tremor Totem, so there could be some fights where that's really nice. And gloves bring in the main one, Beacon of Light. Beacon of Light, not a lot changed. That's the only big one for Healing Paladin, but it is an important one. Paladin was already a pretty good healer in Classic. If you liked it before, you'll like it now. And I would expect him to get some more interesting runes fairly quickly. Paladin looks pretty good. Paladin was already pretty good in Classic. It just needed a few small things to really tie it all together in a nice bow, and I think they mostly achieved that here. It looks good at 25. I don't see any problems in the future. As for what abilities to look forward to, I could not find a single data mine Paladin ability. Might exist, but I couldn't find one. So I'm totally guessing here, but I wouldn't be surprised to see something Holy Shock focused, either for damage or just making your heals focused on Holy Shocking. I know we don't have Holy Power, and maybe it would be a little OP, but I would love to see Wake of Ashes.
A hunter is a hunter, even in a dream.
Hunter was also a great class in Classic. Really fun to play. Once you started getting geared at 60, it fell off a cliff. Then by BWL, after falling off the cliff, it kind of fell into a chasm several thousand miles deep. Is SoD going to fix that? I think so. We've got three sort of playstyles here, and interestingly, Hunter is the only remaining pure DPS class. I like it. But I'll mention Aspect of the Lion first. This was originally announced as a belt rune that was just a king's buff. Then it was changed to a chest rune that is a king's buff, but also an additional 10% stats for the hunter. There's not a lot of situations where this is the rune we want for personal DPS, but in a group situation, if we're the only one with kings, it's kind of worth doing. It's a little annoying to lose a chest slot, but it is what it is. The first build is your standard ranged DPS builds. For chest, we have Lone Wolf or Master Marksman. Lone Wolf increases your damage by 15% if you have no pet. So yes, this was nerfed from 25%. Kind of a weird nerf because 15% damage is about what your pet would be doing at this level in a group setting. Possibly lower because of some other runes. So this is just a net loss. It's kind of weird. Master Marksman, 5% crit and 25% mana reduction. This is probably the go-to if the situation doesn't dictate you needing Lone Wolf. 5% crit is nice, but the 25% mana reduction on shots could be extremely good. Hunter does have some mana issues in Classic. Now, we don't know how bad they will be in SoD because of all those mana costs being rebalanced, but this could be super useful. Leg runes, it's still sniper training. This was also nerfed extremely hard. It might have been a little strong, but nerfing it down to 10%, I don't know, I would have said 15. Warrior can get multiple flat damage percent increases, and Warlocks can get huge fire damage increase, but some crit for Hunters is too OP, I guess. Other option would be Serpent Spread, adding a Serpent Sting to your multi-shot. This is pretty useless. You would need some insane uptime on all those Serpent Stings for this to be worth it. Maybe that fight does exist, but probably not. Now Glove Rune, this is where it's really at. Chimera Shot or an Explosive Shot. Either of these will work. Whichever one does the most damage is the way to go. We don't know which that will be, but it's probably Chimera Shot, which also comes with some very useful utility. Explosive Shot will probably be good later on. I would expect Lock and Load to show up at some point, but its tooltip is still incorrect, or this is just an extremely awkward ability to use. It says it shares a cooldown with Arcane Shot, but I'm guessing that's from copying the description from Wrath. because it would not make any sense at all if that's the case. I double checked the most recent build update and it still says this. Now, if we want to play this standard style ranged hunter, you can play it as either marksman or survival. However, there's almost no reason to play it as survival at low levels. Higher levels, that can be very, very good because you can go deep survival, sub-spec most of the important marksman talents, and then use lone wolf. Marksman usually has to sub-spec BM because all of the good survival talents for ranged are very deep. So you would not be able to use lone wolf in that situation. At level 25, the only good talents you can get for ranged are in marksman. As long as you're not getting dicked on mana, marksman will be pretty strong at 25, even with these nerfs. Next style is BM, and BM is looking solid in the runes department. For chests we have Cobra Strikes. Your crits make your pet's next 2 hits crit. That is not bad. Kill command on legs. I mentioned it in the hunter specific video, but this is not the version of kill command we should be getting. It is still good, but it's a 1 minute cooldown giving us some pet damage. It really should be the TBC version. At least you can try to use it after Cobra Strikes to force these attacks to crit. It's possible. Sniper training is still worth it for some situations here, but after the nerf that's less likely. And your glove rune is very easily Beast Master, giving your pet a huge stat buff, huge focus regen buff, and turning Growl into a taunt. This all looks pretty good. Pets were really strong at lower levels, and it's very likely hunter pet scaling is going to be in the game. It was data mined, and I'm pretty sure it changed in a build update. We don't know how much pets will scale. We also don't know if that's going to happen at level 25. Pet scaling could be a level 50 rune for all we know. But even with no scaling, your pet should be doing some ludicrous damage at this level. BM only has 2 real issues. There is currently no pet avoidance, and none has been data mined. If there is no pet avoidance at launch, it probably won't be a huge deal at low levels. Most of the time you can keep your pet alive, especially if you know the fight. Higher levels, well, we could have some problems. And the other issue is, you're not doing much. Marksman at 25 will have aimed shot and the new Chimera shot or explosive shot. BM gets no new abilities, so you kinda auto shot, multi-shot. Maybe you can sting if the debuff limit is removed, while your pet does all the work. That could be boring. Our last option is Melee Hunter, and it actually looks really good. Your best chest rune is unfortunately probably Aspect of the Lion. I would love to see Cobra Strikes changed to also work with Melee Hunter, but we got a Lion. Legs is very easy, being a flanking strike. Like fucking yes, dude. This is what makes Melee Hunter work. You and your pet simultaneously deal 100% melee damage. Afterwards, Mongoose Bite and Raptor Strike deal 10% increased damage, stacking up to 3 times. Raptor Strike has a 20% chance to reset the cooldown of Flanking Strike. This is really cool. I'm not sure why the Mongoose Bite thing, that's almost never going to be applicable. I have checked it. Mongoose is currently exactly as it was before. Now Raptor Strike though appears to have been completely changed. It's now an instant attack, not a next melee, on a 3-second cooldown. So you'll start with a Flanking Strike to set up the increased damage, then use Raptor to keep resetting the cooldown on Flanking Strike and build that stacking damage buff up. Your glove rune is Carve, a 6-second AoE melee ability. Seems like it does hit all targets and isn't capped to 3 like multi-shot, so that is nice. Now, it is possible that the Beast Mastery rune ends up being quite good here as well. We don't really want to run Lone Wolf as a melee hunter, and that should increase the damage your pet does when you Flanking Strike. That's why I'd also like to see them make Cobra Strikes work with melee. Having a BM melee focused build would be really goddamn cool, but it will just come down to the numbers. You can obviously use Carve single target. Whether that will be more single target damage than BM rune, I can't say. Probably going to depend on the fight. Overall, Hunter is looking really good. I know some people are sad about the nerfs, but they're not that huge of a deal. With those runes, Hunter was likely going to be doing super physiological levels of DPS. Hunter is already strong at low levels. Those runes on top of Chimera, and while not 100% confirmed, but like 90% confirmed, Hunter getting in combat traps, yeah, we'll still be doing really good DPS. We will have a few annoyances that need to be looked at though, like BM being kind of boring, and Mend Pet is still the channeled version. That's a really awkward ability to use. Just give us the TBC version. And Melee Weaving. If all hunters get the new Raptor Strike and not just the melee hunters, Melee Weaving for a survival sub-spec marksman build could be incredible. Hunter's future looks pretty damn good. I would expect Melee Hunter to get further fleshed out. I would really like for it to get a gap closer. If they don't want to do Harpoon, they could just let Disengage jump forward, and you can call it Engage. Or even just give me Net for PvP. That would work and be really fun. And hopefully BM gets a few updates. I would like to see it move further towards the TPC version of BM. Abilities that we're likely to see down the line, I've mentioned Trap Launcher and Ranged Traps before, since the tooltips do say 40-yard range now. I really think that's going to happen in some form. I am almost certain. In the most recent build update, I did find Freezing Arrow, not to be confused with Frost Arrow. This is an NPC skill. Frost Arrow looks like the player ability version. We may get just that, or we may get a trap launcher for all traps. I'm not sure, but I would be astonished if we don't get at least Freezing Arrow now. And finally, pet treats. I found this in the most recent build update as well. It could be nothing, but looks like maybe a DPS cooldown for BM. That's weird, but sounds really cool, and I like this. Warlock. I'll be honest with you guys, I never really liked Warlock. Without a doubt, my least favorite class in Classic, TBC, Wrath, and even beyond. But I have to admit, even I think this looks pretty fun. Your first option is fire-based. Lake of Fire, Incinerate, and Chaos Bolt. Holy shit, this looks crazy. Later on, you can get great talents like Emberstorm and Ruin, but even at 25, this looks really strong. You don't have Hellfire at 25, so you don't have to worry about the whole unaliving yourself accidentally thing, but you will have Immolate, Rain of Fire, and Searing Pain on top of the runes. 25% from Incinerate, 40% from Lake of Fire. That is some insane levels of fire damage. There's also a kit for a dot playstyle. Master Channeler or Soul Siphon, depending on the situation. Everlasting Affliction, Refreshing Your Corruption. Okay, and Haunt, an admittedly very cool dot, causing the target to take more shadow damage from your dots by 20%, and you are healed for its damage when it ends or is dispelled. Not sure if that counts when the target dies, but I would assume so. Pretty cool looking spec. It will run into a lot of the same problems as mentioned in the Shadow Priest section. Dots they have a few problems in Classic. This will probably suck on Dungeon Trash, because the mobs will die so fast, but outside of that, I think this will be okay in the 25 bracket. Partially because you can drop your leg rune for Demonic Pact, which leads into the next build, a pet-based one. So it seems like they're trying to do a whole lot with Warlock. Fire-based, shadow-based, dot-based, pet-based, and tank. That's 5 playstyles, more than any other class. And I think because of that, some of these builds have suffered a little bit, at least at 25. There's 3 runes for a pet build. Demonic Pact, Demonic Tactics, and Shadow Bolt Volley. Yeah, there's kind of not a full kit of pet-based runes. I'm guessing there will be one for gloves later on. However, Demonic Pact is very good. Your pet's crits apply Demonic Pact to party members, buffing your party member's spell damage by 10% of yours, or 1/2 of your level, whichever is higher. So you could take this with the dot spec, but your pet's crit chance would be pretty low, I would assume, at 25 if you don't have Demonic Tactics. However, our pets are very, very likely to get some form of scaling, including crit chance, so this could work later on. Either way, Demonic Pact is going to be a sought after buff. Shamans do not get Wrath of Air, so this is a very rare buff and a very useful buff. And Shadow Bolt Volley, this kind of not great. Your Shadow Bolt now strikes up to 5 targets within a chain distance of 10 yards, but for 20% reduced damage. So you get an extremely strong cleave ability, and an extremely iconic one at that. I remember getting obliterated by Kazak and his Shadow Bolt Volley back in the day. Good times. There are some talents that could make this extremely strong for AoE later on, but by the wording, it also looks like this replaces your normal Shadow Bolt. Does that mean it always does minus 20% damage, or only if it hits multiple targets? This is really unclear, especially because this was changed in the most recent build update. It had just said 20 damage, not 20% damage. This will require some testing, but my guess is it could be really good later on for AoE, not so much at 25. I mean, you can take Lake of Fire at 25. And finally, tank spec. This looks fairly solid. Much more thought out than the rogue tank spec. Your rune kit is Metamorphosis, Demonic Grace, probably Master Channeler, but there's some potential for Lake of Fire. Metamorphosis does so much more than just a flesh wound. You get a charge with a stun to get into combat, 500% increased armor, crit immune, your Curse of Recklessness becomes a taunt, Demonic Howl becomes a challenging shout, that's an AoE taunt, Searing Pain is now instant, Shadow Bolt becomes a melee cleave. All really fantastic stuff, and you should have no problems tanking anything. You're not necessarily a better raid tank than a warrior in most cases, but you do excel at a few things like ranged threat, and you do have some self-healing. But one thing that is criminally underrated about ranged threat, even if a mob isn't ranged, if there's mobs spawning all over the place, you can just stand there and turret to pick them up. A paladin or warrior or rogue is going to have to run all over the place trying to pick them up. That's a huge DPS loss because of all your DPS having to adjust to all that movement. And possibly the best thing of all, Metamorphosis just looks cool, and it's permanent. A lot of people will spec this just to AFK in Metamorphosis in town. Worth. For future and data mine stuff, the only thing I came across was a potential interrupt for lock tank with disrupt. Warrior. Warrior was god tier in Classic, and it's looking pretty close to that in SoD too, with one big caveat. It's looking pretty anemic at level 25. Let's go over what we got. Two-hand DPS Warrior is in, and it looks awesome. Rune choices are... actually, there's a lot. Gloves are probably the least flexible. Quick Strike. Two-handed instant attack replacing Heroic Strike. This is huge. Remember, Heroic Strike is on next melee, so it overwrites your auto attack. This doesn't. Having an instant rage dump like this is pretty huge, and it also gives you another chance to proc Wind Fury. You don't get Mortal Strike until level 40. You don't have Whirlwind. This is pretty big. For the leg slot, you have Consumed by Rage, granting 20% melee damage after exceeding 80 rage. Jesus Christ. Or Frenzied Assault. Both are really good, but at 25, you'll probably roll with Frenzied Assault. A flat 20% attack speed is very strong. Consumed by Rage is also very, very strong, but unless the new raid buffs or new gear are kind of crazy, you'd probably have trouble getting that 80 rage reliably. If you can get that rage, then you'll probably want CBR. Chest slot has even more options. Blood Frenzy. This is likely to be the worst. 3 rage each time you deal bleed damage. If you are extremely rage starved, this could be okay, since you can get rage from rend and deep wounds. There's also a small possibility that weapon procs will also give you the rage. There's a lot of weapons in Classic with an on hit that causes bleed, and many of them are axes, so small chance of some synergy there. Raging Blow, another instant attack dealing 100% weapon damage, 8 second cooldown, seemingly no rage cost, but it's only usable while under Enrage, Zerker Rage, or Blood Rage. At 25, you'll only have Blood Rage or possibly Consumed by Rage. This mostly pairs really well with CBR, or to justify it without it. And finally, Flagellation, a flat 25% damage bonus for 12 seconds after you Blood Rage or Zerker Rage. You won't have Zerker Rage at 25, but you will have Blood Rage. And that's only a 1 minute cooldown. So that's up 20% of the time. That is pretty huge. Dual Wield. Probably not really going to hit it at 25, but you do have some good rune options for it. Flagellation for the chest, CBR for the legs, and gloves you have Endless Rage, which is 25% more rage from all the damage you deal. This is not ideal, but if you're just rage starved and not able to proc CBR reliably, this could be worth it. Otherwise, Single-Minded Fury. A flat 10% damage increase when dual wielding, and a 10% movement increase. Warriors don't get shit for movement speed. This sucks leveling when you don't have a mount. So this is pretty useful just for leveling, if you're going to level as dual wield. Although, speaking of leveling, there is another glove rune good for leveling. Victory Rush. 8 second cooldown and 10% HP return. Only usable after killing a proper level target. This is super nice for leveling, but so is Single-Minded Fury. And so is Quick Strike. Tank Warrior. This is probably the most complete tank at level 25. You get a lot of your tank skills very early, and you've got some good runes. Furious Thunder. This causes Thunderclap to have a higher attack delay, deals 50% increased threat, and it can be used in any stance. About damn time. This is a huge quality of life improvement for Warrior tank. Having to dance to put down T-Clap or trying to get a DPS Warrior to do it in raids was seriously annoying. For gloves, you've got Devastate and an extremely strong version of Devastate, doing 100% weapon damage and stacking an additional 10% for each stack of Thunder Armor. 150% weapon damage. That's not bad at all. Warrior should see some decent damage and threat generation out of this. We don't know how much rage it will cost, but the Wrath version was 15 rage, so probably around there. Chest rune not as impactful. Probably take Wardbringer for dungeons if you'll ever need to bounce around. Otherwise, Flagellation is nice for threat generation. And in comparison to other new tanks, Warrior is still very good, even at 25. You probably won't be crit immune at 25, depends on the new gear. That's about it. There's not a lot of downsides to Warrior tanking. What about the future of Warrior? As I mentioned, Warrior DPS is a little anemic at 25, but it's not in the toilet. In between 25 and 40, they're really going to be on the D-ball. After 40, they really hit the trend, and by 60, they'll be absolutely yoked. Two-hand DPS looks like it's online, dual wield is still very much alive, and tanking will still be incredibly strong. To me, this is similar to Priest, how it feels still very much like Warrior, just Warrior with the saturation turned up. Runes still coming for Warrior. It looks like we've got Gladiator stance in some form. We don't have any details on it, but it was data mined, and I think someone at Blizz tweeted about it. Spell Reflect also had a version data mined. A ranged pull ability similar to Heroic Throw was also data mined. Personally, I'd like to have Heroic Leap. It's just fun, okay? And that about covers it. Damn, that was a lot of work. And I had to keep updating this as new information came in all the way until the last minute. I really didn't want to put any out-of-date information in here. I think I was able to cover most of the things I wanted here. I wanted to give a general overview of what each class was going to be like and what options were available in regards to playstyle. Not focus on what class is going to be doing top DPS, since that's just an insane amount of speculation. I like to speculate, but even for me that's a bit much. I put a shit ton of work into this, one of the biggest videos I've done in years. So if you enjoyed the video, hit that subscribe button, like button, Hunter Nerfs Don't Bother Me button, all that other shit. I appreciate each and every one I get. Seriously, I know you aren't subscribed, Lars in Stockholm. Just click the subscribe button, maybe even click the join button. And I'll be streaming an absolute assload of SOD here on YouTube. I know you want to watch it. It's going to be really good. Just do it. Next, I will probably cover some Hunter-specific stuff, and probably only one more video before launch. I mean, we had 2 videos in a row, not Hunter-specific. That might be a record. Let me know if there's something specific you'd like to hear about in SOD. Maybe I can get it out. But that is going to be all for this one. I really appreciate you all watching, and I will see you all for the next one. Talk to you soon. Can't believe I still have to edit this. Jesus Christ.